show Leila how we welcome someone to the stage at Coaching Con. Let's go!
Smoke or fire. Love you too. Cool. You guys ready to rock? Gotta figure out the clip. Is there, oh, shit. All right. Sorry. I thought it was the screen behind me, but it's apparently the ones on the side. So there we go. Okay, accommodating to the stage. Wonderful. So today, what we're going to talk about is how to get other people to do stuff. Like making money. Honestly, what I want to share with you guys are really the 5 principles that have been responsible for building our portfolio and all the companies within it. I obviously have a lot of context to most of you in this room because we have done a lot in the coaching industry in general and specifically fitness. Proof that this works, money numbers, more impressive money numbers. Let's dive in. So here's what most people do. Oh, this is not going to be good. I'm going to move the hair. You have a small business, like many people in here do. When I say small, like you're doing maybe less than 10 million in revenue. And you want to grow into a big business, right? But in trying to do so, you say, okay, I have a small business. I need more traffic. I need more sales. I need more bodies. I need more money, right? We're like, that should make a big business. That makes sense. But what happens is that you get more traffic, or you make more sales, or you make more money, and then you end up with still a small business. And not even still a small business, but you have a small business that has less conversions, you have higher churn, feels chaotic, you have no data or numbers, and you're completely overwhelmed. Has anyone ever been there? Yeah, you're lying if you don't raise your hand. That's not the way to go. So what is it that creates the transformation from a small business into a big business? I know this because we do it day in and day out, talk to 30 plus companies a week, and I can see the common denominators between the two, right? The difference is the ones that can deploy the 5 principles of management that we're going to talk about today. I know what you're thinking, you're like, management, I swear to God, it's the thing. So think about this. You guys are all here for Coaching Con. Many of you have probably been on sports teams. Anyone been on a sports team? Not me. But if a business is like a sports team, right, does it make sense to constantly be adding more players to the team? Or does it make sense to make sure that we have the best practices with the best coach first? Which one? Coach? Players? Coach, exactly. That being said, the average coach of a sports team has a 30% variation on team success. And this is what I found very fascinating, is that, ironically, the average CEO has almost the same influence on a business. And I know this because I lived it. So, a long time ago, that was my first job out of college. Has anyone else worked at a big box gym here? I feel like I've got some people in the audience. Wonderful. So, 24-hour fitness. I lived in Michigan, moved out to California. I was like, I'm going to get a job at a big box gym. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to make all this money, train all these clients, right? We all know that's not exactly how it feels. So get there, and my first manager, his name is Mike. And I was really lucky that Mike was there because some of you may know from watching my content, I've talked about how I went there, and that's where I really learned sales. Because it was like my back was against the wall, I had no money, I had to make it out there because I signed a lease, and I didn't know anybody. And thankfully, Mike was like the best manager that you could look for, the best leader that you could ask for. He was predictable, he had really clear communication, he was super encouraging. So like when I'm just like absolutely eating shit on the sales floor, he's like, you've got this. And honestly, I think that's why I was able to pull myself out of that spot of feeling like I was inadequate, of feeling like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this, I don't know if I can do sales, maybe this is like, you know what I mean? And he made the hard job fun at the end of the day. And I think that, obviously, the more that you like working, because maybe you like the people that you work with, the more you want to do it. So naturally, I ended up ascending to being one of the top reps. But then, Mike was so good that they actually asked him to go open up a new location. And we were like, oh shit, that sucks, like we're losing Mike, but you know, I'm sure they'll bring somebody good in. Introducing Not Mike. Not Mike was totally opposite from Mike. Like it was, I will never forget the first meeting. We're all sitting there, it's like the whole group of personal trainers, and the guy walks in, and literally I think within the first 60 seconds, he said the word fuck like 18 times. You fucking piece of shit, you gotta get fucking sales and hit fucking quota. And I was like, ew, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, read the room. So Not Mike came in, completely ran the place with fear. He was unpredictable, like, he would not be there every day. We didn't know when he was gonna come in. You know, old Mike, what he used to do is he used to come in, he used to help us close deals, he was on the sales floor, like getting in there with us. New Mike didn't even show up on time, we didn't know when he was gonna be there, he didn't get back to any of us. He was constantly swearing at us, yelling at us, he was unfair and assumptive, and he made a hard job worse. And I'll never forget the trying moment for me was, there was a meeting that we had, I want to say it was like 6 weeks into him being there, and I was like, mentally, I'm like, I'm fucking out of here. And he literally looked at me, and I stopped selling people into the gym because I was like, I know I'm gonna leave. And he said, if you don't hit quota this month, I will run you over with my truck and light you on fire. And I was like, dope, I'm out, right? So can you guess what happened to that location after a short 3 months? Fucking tanked. Yeah, went from being one of the top performing locations to absolutely mediocre at best. It was awful. And all the top trainers, myself included, left immediately. Like literally they got left with just shit. So, what this experience did for me is it put me on a mission to actually understand what creates a business where people actually genuinely love to work there, right? Because if you really think about it, people are like, how do I get people to work harder? How do I get people to work harder for me? And I'm like, well, people tend to do things, more of things that they like doing. And so if they don't like you, they probably don't want to work harder for you. And I understood that because I was able to live it. And I knew what it was like firsthand to have somebody who was unclear, you know, they were unhappy, and they were confusing me in my job itself. And so I ended up being unhappy in the job, and I thought to myself, I don't want to create a place like that where people come and work for me and feel the same way. And so over the last 7 years, I've taken that principle, which I think honestly was just a frame shift for me, and combined it with learning all the tactics I have to come up with figuring out really the 5 principles of management that I want to share with you guys today. And now you could say, Leila, I feel like there's more to it than this, but let me tell you, like in growing Gym Launch, which went from 0 to 27 million in 2 years, these were the 5 things that I focused on the most. And I think that they're relevant for all of you, especially given the industry that you're in. And I find it ironic that so many coaching businesses have such terrible management, because the same principles that I'm going to share with you here can also apply to how you work with your clients and how you teach your coaches to coach. So this is applicable in many ways. So, what I would love everybody to do is I'd like to be a little more engaging. I would like you guys to, if you've got paper, it looks like there's notebooks, that's amazing. Notebooks, if you have a phone, whatever you have, I want you guys to rate yourselves. Because we're gonna go through these 5 things, and what I really hate is when you leave a presentation, you leave a, you know, whatever it is, a talk, and it's like you have nothing tangible to take away. So what I'd like you guys to do is be able to rate yourselves. So I've structured this in a way so that after I go through each section, we're gonna rate ourselves, and maybe I'll pick on someone to share, I don't know. And then we can figure out basically at the end, it's like, what's your top constraint? And then you know that walking out of here, that's like the one takeaway from this talk, is you understand your top constraint, you've identified it, and you probably know a little something about how to fix it. Does that sound fair? Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, cool. So we're gonna start with the first piece of this, which is expectations. Very mind-blowing, very sexy, keeping expectations clear. So what are expectations? I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think defining terms is important. Okay, expectations are your verbalization of how someone should act or something should be done. So to give you an example, make your bed. You hear parents say this to their kids all the time. It's like, go make your bed. Oh, it looks like shit, right? Like, who wants their kid to make their bed like that? It doesn't look that great. Or you could say, make your bed like a 5-star hotel would. You've got the fluffed pillows, you've got everything folded all nice, it looks nice and crisp. It's like, that looks amazing, it's so nice to sleep in, right? Difference in how I have verbalized my expectations for that person, right? And so really what this is, in an organization, expectations are often the unsaid rules of engagement. right? So they're the non-negotiable, agreed upon behaviors and norms that everyone on the team is held to based on the values of the organization. So a good example of this would be if some guy came on, and let's take NCI's team as an example, right? So they've got their values, they've got their vibe, right? And then say that they hire somebody from, say like a tech startup in Silicon Valley, and he comes in and he, I don't know, let's say he's director of marketing or something, and he comes in and he starts behaving in a way that he behaved in his last company. And then everyone looks at him and they're like, fuck this guy. It's like, well, why are they saying fuck this guy? It's like, well, probably because the rules of the game are different. And the unset expectations that exist in this organization are different than the last one. So he's behaving with the same behaviors that he's been trained with at his last company, and he's now bringing them into this one. And that's why it seems like, oh, it doesn't seem like he's a match. It's like, well, he's been trained to act in that way, not in this way. And that's why it's so important for us to understand how to verbalize these things. Otherwise, we're never going to get everyone to commingle. And honestly, without properly defined expectations, nobody understands how to win or lose the game. So if you think about it, like with these two companies, say Silicon Valley tech startup is monopoly. You hire that guy, he comes here, he's now playing checkers. Different game, different rules. Oftentimes though, nobody expects that. They're like, well, I hired this director of marketing, he should come here and do the marketing, he should know how to do everything, right? And it's like we tend to assume that people should know these things. But people don't know what winning or losing is in your organization, in your business, in your company, in your team. They're just thinking about their most relevant experience that they just had recently. And so if you look at a successful business, it really has 4 levels of expectations. And for the sake of time, we're going to talk about the most important one, which is core values. I feel like this is one that everyone here could take away, because honestly, like, look, there's a ton of you. You guys are all, building a coaching business of some sort, or you are a coach yourself. What's going to set you apart? What's going to be able to attract other coaches that are like you? One of the biggest strategic advantages that we have when we're growing Gym Launch is we're fucking diehards about our core values. I don't think people understand. It's like, no, it's got to be your marketing. Go look at our marketing funnel. It's a piece of shit. So what are core values, right? They are the highest level of expectations of a company. So in acquisition.com, when we take in these big fancy businesses to do stuff with them, what's the first thing we do? We look at the freaking core values. Why? Because those are the expectations at the very highest level. They are where everything else stems from. And if you really think about it, expectations are decision-making filters. And so they're really the root beliefs that an organization operates from, the guiding principles that guide the organization's behaviors. And if you can get the core values right, what you don't need to do is you don't need to rule with rules, right? So what do I mean by that, ruling with rules? Well, I'm sure everyone has experienced this to some degree, which is you're at a job and they hand you this pamphlet and they're like, follow this SOP. And it's like 30 pages of all these rules and guidelines that you have to follow. On the other hand, what the best organizations in the world do is that they rule with values, or they lead with values, right? And so rather than having clock in every day at 8 a.m. sharp, respond to every teammate within 120 seconds, your end of week report must be turned in by 5 p.m. every week, you can just say speed is king. And then you ask people to use that as a decision-making filter for all their actions. And so when someone comes to me and they tell me that people in their organization aren't following the rules, I'm like, let's look at your core values. And nearly every dang time, they have weak core values. One, they can't tell me, they're like, oh shit, yeah, Leila just asked me, this is fucking awkward. And then they like go on their website and they're like, oh shit, I think that's these 3, but I think we changed it. And then I'm like, we're done. Right? Because they already lost, because they don't know. I don't think people understand because they think this stuff is like the soft, amorphous, but really this is setting the tone for the standard you have of everybody on the team. And it makes life a hell of a lot easier if you can lead a team and also lead your customers with these values. And so a good example of like a delineation between these two would be, we had the core value, speed is king. I knew a company that had one that was pace yourself. So as you can imagine, those two operate very differently. If somebody's going to be at one company, they're going to be like, okay, speed is king, I'm going to get things done fast, and maybe they're not like absolutely perfect. Or if something's pace yourself, then it's like, maybe I go a little slower and maybe I care more about quality. You have to understand what is strategically the best decision for your business based on the industry you're in. Another example is always innovate, which one of my friends, that is their core value. So they're constantly trying new things at their company. It's like every time they have an idea, they put a little skunk group together and they try a little new idea, they try and spin something up, right? Well, at gym launch, our core value was do the boring work. And so what does that mean? That means that we don't do all these new things. It means that we put our heads down, we're like, fuck the new things, fuck the shiny objects, like, we're gonna get to work on this, and we're gonna double down on what we're already doing. This is why these things are important. Because think about it like this, right? Let's take a restaurant, for example. If you're in the restaurant business, and a customer walks in and it's 11:15, and say you stop serving breakfast at 11, and the customer says, is there any way I can still get eggs? How does your team know what to say? Do they serve eggs? Do they not serve eggs? Like, it sounds ridiculous, but how many times, have you guys ever been to a restaurant where you're like, can I get some breakfast? And they're like, ugh. And they're like, I gotta go ask my manager, right? Awkward. And the reason for that is because they have different values. It's, do you expect them to always delight the customer? Is that core to the values? Or do you expect them to uphold the agreed upon serving hours? Right? So a great delineation between these two would be like, if you go to McDonald's at 11:15 and they stop at 11, they're like, fuck you, get out of here. McDonald's ain't serving you fucking eggs. But if you go to like Nancy's bed and breakfast at 11:15, she's like, oh honey, I'll make you eggs, don't worry about it. Right? Values of an organization drive behavior. If you want to change how your team behaves, change the values that you have as agreed upon norms. For example, our core values at acquisition.com, unimpeachable character, sincere candor, competitive greatness. Just a little blurb on how these apply to us. So Alex and I spent literally a day locked in a room, we brought our CFO in, and we said, what are our new core values going to be for acquisition.com? And we agreed on these 4 obvious reasons if I explain them to you. Unimpeachable character. We are taking in businesses. We're taking minority stake in them. If this person's like a fuck ass, then do I want to be associated with them? What's that going to look like for our brand? Our brand is one of trust, loyalty, integrity. So do we want to associate with people who don't have unimpeachable character? The answer is no. What would that do for other people in the portfolio if they found out that we had like somebody in there who was just like a complete asshole, or they weren't nice and they were like, you know, doing something illegal, right? Or unethical more so. Wouldn't be good. And on the other side, what would it look like if we hired people who were unethical and they were working with our portfolio CEOs? It would look pretty bad. So we felt like that was a prominent enough one to add as a value. Same goes for sincere candor. What we know is that we cannot have an impact on businesses unless the CEO is confidently and truthful with us, and unless we are truthful with them. And so something that we talk about in our organization is we say shoot the elephant, which is like every time we're on a call with the CEO, with their executive team, we say we've got to shoot the elephant. And there's an elephant in the room today, like who's shooting it today? Is it Sheila? Is it Neil? Is it Leila? And we pass it, we're like, you're shooting the elephant, and here's the elephant that you're shooting. Because we know that you can do all the fancy things to organizations, you can add all the systems in place, you can do all those things, but if you aren't having the hard conversations, you will get stuck and stagnant. And lastly was competitive greatness. Why competitive greatness? Because we know, Alex and I, what we're doing this for. We already sold a company, we've made money, we've done that whole thing. So we said, we're doing this for the sake of the game. And we want other people who are in it for the sake of the game. Now, the industry that we're in now, a lot of people are in it because they just want to make a shit ton of money. They don't care if they're miserable. They're just like, I just want to make money. They're not thinking about impact. And so this is what sets us apart in terms of, with our firm, is because we say we're competitively great, meaning we're not in this. No, I would never hire somebody just because they want to make a bigger paycheck. They have to be purpose-driven. They have to be impact-driven. What does that really mean? In my opinion, what it means is they actually give a shit about people. They give a shit about our portfolio companies, they give a shit about the results that they're getting, they give a shit about the work they do on a daily basis. And they do it because they want to be great, not because they want to make fat paychecks. That is why core values are so important to an organization. And just so you guys understand why it is so important to continue to repeat these things over and over again, and why I've given you countless examples, is because in your organization, if you feel like I've told them this before, I've talked about these values, you should talk about them until you fucking hate them. Because the honest truth is that the average employee doesn't even believe that something's important to the organization until you've said it 7 times. It's ridiculous. I literally feel like I'm continuously mocking myself in our team because I'm like, that's a great example of competitive greatness right there. I'm like, ooh, good, shooting the elephant. Like, they know what we're gonna say behind it. Because it's like we say it enough times. And until you feel like your team is mocking you and they're saying what you're gonna say before you, because you're so cheesy because you say it so often, you're not there yet. That being said, I want you guys to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 for core values expectations, right? 1 is like abysmal, you have fucking nothing. 10 is like, bitch, why am I in this room? Just jot it down on paper, write a note for yourself. Fantastic. Okay, next, we've gone through expectations. We have accountability, which I love for this audience specifically to talk about because all of my examples are in fitness and weight loss. That is where I come from. So accountability. What is accountability? Everyone kind of mixes it up and it seems vague in many aspects, and that's why I really want to break it down. Okay, so accountability is the quality or state of being responsible to one's obligations. Okay, holding someone accountable means holding them responsible for their actions and results. Notice the difference between that and responsibility. So, as a person who manages people, it's really your job to always be letting people on your team know how they're doing in relation to how you want them to be doing. I know it sounds simple, but most people don't do this. And it's your job. It's not someone else's job. It's not your COO's job. It's not the finance person's job. It's not a general manager's job. It's not the manager's job. It's your job. You don't delegate accountability. You disseminate it down. If you're not holding accountable the people at the top of your organization, because you're like, oh, they have more experience, I don't need to hold them accountable. Oh, they're super smart. Listen, he's different. That's why I don't need to hold him accountable. Everybody needs someone to hold them accountable. Unless you own your own business, and even then, why the fuck are you guys here? Probably because you want someone to hold you accountable. You're like, shit, it'd be nice to have someone tell me what to do. This took me 3 years to figure out. And what I figured out was that really I started calling myself Chief Accountability Officer rather than CEO. The reason for that was because I realized that the best thing that I could do was hold the standards that I believe to be true for the entire organization. And if you're not loud about those, and you're not constantly telling your direct reports where they're sitting, then you're not doing the job. Which is fine, you can hire somebody else to do it too. I prefer to do both. So what are the symptoms of low accountability on team? Let's look at this because some of you might relate. Okay? The hard science of this is that you've got low revenue per head count. What does that mean? That means that you have a lot of people and they don't make you a lot of money. Hidden expenses, you're like, what the fuck? We paid for what? Right? Low sales, low upsells, low cross-sells. A team with low accountability, not making high sales. And high employee churn. So you feel like you're constantly having to replace people because they're quitting, they're getting poached, they're going to go start their own business and take your clients, whatever. That's the hard science of it. Now the behavioral is that lots of complaining. Lots of complaining from your employees, lots of resentment. So your leaders might resent the people below them. You might resent the people below you. Feels gross. Unfinished projects and high activity with very low output. Has anyone ever felt that way? Well, I have. We had 120 full-time employees at Gen Watch. And I remember Alex and I were on a walk one day, and I was like, I fucking hate this. He was like, why? It was our biggest month ever. We had just done our first record breaking of 4.5 million. And I was like, I do not want to do this. And he was like, ugh, hold on. What do you mean you don't want to do this? Making good money. And I was like, I just feel awful. I feel like we have all these people. I feel like they're not doing anything. I just feel like I'm doing all the fucking work, and so are you, and I feel like everyone's on our back. And I think that's what it really was feeling like I was carrying the load alone. And it took me a while to figure out what the actual problem was because it was staring me in the mirror. It was me realizing that I had not yet become the right kind of person to lead that team, to really take and hold everybody so accountable in a way that wasn't mean or punishing, but in a way that was empowering. And ironically, once I was able to figure that out and make that switch, we then moved on to 75 full-time employees making the same money. Why? Because I started holding people accountable. You know what we saw? The people that had been getting by the whole time doing nothing. And so what is accountability? Accountability is really the glue that is going to hold commitment to a result, right? So it's just like as a coach, if you're trying to get someone to do something, a lot of you sell accountability, right? Because they commit to something, accountability is what gets them the result once they commit. That's how I think of it. So let's dissect a common scenario where accountability constantly delivers results. There was a study done, and it was during Christmas time. And that study did basically an analysis of how much weight somebody was going to gain, lose, or maintain during the holiday season. And so what they did is they had half of the group weigh themselves every day. And then they had half of the group not weigh themselves every day. No diet, no exercise, no nothing. That was the simple instructions. Just either weigh yourself or don't weigh yourself, you're in one of these groups, right? So those who weighed themselves daily actually lost 1.9 pounds through those 60 days of the holiday season. They lost weight. Not because they went on some diet or anything, but probably subconsciously by looking at the scale, they're thinking, oh shit, goes up one day, maybe they eat a little less that day. And then those who didn't weigh themselves gained 4.9 pounds, right? Because again, you're just avoiding it, you're not looking at it. It tends to go in the direction we don't want when we don't measure it. What I want you guys to understand is that for your team, you are the scale. They don't have anybody else. It is you. You are the one that is telling them, are you going in the right or the wrong direction every day? So it's like we understand how this works in terms of fitness. It's like, yeah, they get on the scale and it's obviously like more, and you're probably telling me like, listen, I know you don't like weighing yourself, but like people who weigh themselves every day tend to lose more weight. It's like, it's the same with this. Teams that get more feedback tend to do better. Same thing. And so what does that look like, right? It's really just looking at what would low performance be, what is ideal performance, and where do they fall? And then verbalizing that to the person. Where do they fall within that range? What would they need to do to make it higher? What would they do to make it lower? Well, if you wanted to do an absolute shit job, you would do these things. And if you wanted to blow my mind and exceed my expectations, you would do these things. And it's communicating that with your team. So I get it, it's like, if this is so simple, why is there such a large void of this in business? Because I'm pretty sure more people know other people in business that have shitty teams and low accountability than they do the opposite. I think honestly, most of the time, telling a grown person that they're not meeting expectations is just uncomfortable. Like that's simply what it is, right? We're humans, we want to avoid things that are uncomfortable, like let's just all admit it. It sucks to have these conversations on a consistent basis. And we believe the lies that ruminate in our head that prevent us from doing that work. Right? But what we have to remember is that our brains are wired for survival, not success. Those lies sound like, I shouldn't have to babysit them. Because apparently holding people accountable is babysitting them. They're an experienced adult. They should know better. Again, no. Monopoly, checkers. The game here is different. We're a high-performance culture. They just don't fit in. That's my absolute favorite for like companies that fire people all the fucking time. They're like, just high-performance. They just don't fit in. I'm like, you're an idiot. Anyways, I don't have time to manage someone to this extent. I just need to fire them. It's like, you don't have time to do your job, hire somebody else to do your job. I don't know. So really what it is that our anger protects us from destroying our own self-image. And guys, I say all those things up there and I make fun of it because that used to be me. I used to think those things too. I didn't get it. But every time that you're angry about what somebody on your team is doing, look in the mirror because what you are is you're afraid of what it says about you. We are responsible for hiring these people. We are responsible for training these people. If we're complaining about somebody that's still on our team, what the fuck are we doing? Either become the boss they need or get somebody who's better fit for the team. So then the question becomes, how do you actually hold someone accountable? Like tactically, what does it look like? Because I think there's like a lot of like vague, strategic, like you gotta hold people accountable, but it's like, I took a really long time to think, I'm like, what is it exactly? How can we do it in like a very simple manner? And so this is the formula I've come up with. And I really think that this is it. Like, I mean, someone else proved me wrong, but like, I don't really like this formula. Expectations. You set expectations for people. You then tie that expectation to a measurement. That makes sense, right? I expect you to close deals. This is how many deals I expect you to close. And then the only thing that can make accountability go up or down, meaning they have more accountability or less, is your feedback to them about it. The more times you tell somebody about the measurement, this is where the numbers are at. They see it on the dashboard, they see it on the scoreboard, they log in and see it on the dashboard, the CRM, they see it in their end of week report, they have to tell it to you every day. The more accountable they are. And so what does that look like and what forms do we have? You guys can screenshot this. This is not a screenshot, it's a picture. Expectations may come in the form of job description, core values, departmental expectations, role expectations, a company mission. Measurement might look like timelines, scorecards, utilization metrics, MBOs, KPIs, surveys. And feedback looks like meetings, one-on-ones, end-of-week reports, team surveys, feedback exercises, and recognition and reward. And if you can do all of those three, then you have held someone accountable. So I'd like you all to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on accountability. 1 is like, it's abysmal and I really don't have much because honestly I'm being a bit of a ninny and I don't want to tell someone they're doing a really good job. And 10 is that everyone knows exactly where they stand with you and you're doing a fantastic job and you have a high performance team that loves what they do. Wonderful. Third piece to the puzzle is communication. I'm sure we've all heard this, so I'd like to define terms again, okay? What do I consider to be good communication within a company? Okay, good communication within a company is going to be a combination of trading your assumptions for curiosity and actively listening to others on the team. So if you see somebody who every time a teammate does something wrong, right, they assume that that person is trying to fuck them, an idiot, doesn't work, etc. Not great at communication, because what should you actually be doing is leading with curiosity and asking questions. So good communication, what it should do for your team is it should bring them from ignorance to understanding. It is the bridge between the two. They are ignorant of something. Once you have said things to them, shown things to them, presented things to them, they then understand it and can do something about it, right? To explain the importance of this, so you guys understand, in Sparta, they didn't even have a word for freedom. And I think you all know how obviously rampant slavery was there. Not even a word for freedom. That's how powerful communication is. And so why should you care with that and how it applies to you and your business and making fucking money, right? Well, nobody ever quits a job where a boss over-communicates. Or at least I have not seen that on a survey yet. Clients tend not to quit companies or leave companies because they get over-communicated to. So usually I haven't fucking heard from this customer service rep in 3 months. They won't answer my email, they won't cancel me, right? No spouse will leave a marriage because the person's over-communicating, right? We tend to under-communicate, not over-communicate. And so I doubt that anybody in here is going to over-index in the wrong direction. And what it really is that it's your job as the CEO or the founder to set the tone for what good communication actually looks like. Why? Because this is what I want you guys to get. The way that people perceive you in your company is directly correlated with your communication skills. If I spoke in a different manner, you guys would perceive me differently. You know, Alex talks the way he talks, you guys perceive him a way. You perceive people the way they communicate. So, you guys might all have somebody in your company. I know I have people in my company who are absolute fucking weapons. They are so smart, they know so much. And when it comes to talking, they go, you know? And so people in the company think they're dumb. I'm like, you're so smart, we just need to work on communication, right? It's like we all have people like that. And that's why communication is so important. Because if you can be a good communicator, people can like and trust you. Because they understand you, you feel transparent. What it really is that what you think, what you say, what you do are aligned. And you're such a good communicator that it's obvious to everybody. And generally speaking, to be an effective leader, you kind of want to be liked and trusted. Now, many people might say, I need to be respected, not liked. But let me tell you, if somebody likes you, people do more of what they like. And therefore they will work more if they like you. Light bulb moment. So then what makes a good communicator? How do we define this, right? Because I remember when I was starting Gym Launch and I had no fucking clue what I was doing. I was 23, made like a team of 100. I was like, oh my God, they say I need to be better communicating. What the fuck does that mean? Well, I found this study done by MIT, and this is what did it for me. Basically what this study did is that they took 35 companies and they had everybody in the company wear a badge. And what that badge did was that badge essentially monitored the communication that they had with other people, the number of interactions, the way in which they interacted, basically any time they had any interaction with anybody else in the company, right? And these were all different companies of like different industries. There was nothing similar about them at all. They were just able to measure it with these badges. Here's what they found about communication, because what they wanted to figure out was what contributes to the best communication, and how does that affect the results in the company. There are 4 keys to success in communication. There's energy, there's engagement, emotional control, and exploration. I will break this down in a second, but here's what I want you guys to get. Communication itself was actually a greater predictor of success than individual intelligence or skill on a team. This is why I preach this shit. You can have people who are less intelligent and less skilled, and if you can create a place where people can genuinely communicate well to each other, you can have an advantage over those who are smarter and have more skills. I feel like everyone can do that, right? Yeah. Easy. So what does that look like? What are the 4 elements? Okay, energy. The number of exchanges that you have on your team. What does that look like, right? Do you guys like each other's Instagram posts? Do your employees that go on like each other, comment? Are they commenting on things outside of work? Are they slacking each other back quickly? Like how active is your Slack channel? How active when you're on a Zoom call are people in the chat? How often are you reaching out to people to tell them something? If you own the company, how often have you talked to every single person there? That's what energy is. The second piece is engagement. Okay, so engagement is actually the distribution of energy. Who here has been on a meeting where like there's always 3 people that are always talking and giving their opinion, and then there's like 3 who never say shit? Always, right? That is bad engagement because there's no distribution of energy amongst your team. What do I do in those instances? I fucking message those people. I'm like, shut the fuck up. And then I message the other people. I'm like, speak the fuck up. I'm not kidding, it works. I don't say it like that, but in a nice way. The third piece is emotional control. Right? So what they looked at when people were having these conversations is that the only way to make these things negative is if the energy, the engagement, and the exploration is all done with in a reactive manner. So if people are essentially punishing each other with the communication. Right? What does that mean? Well, what they dissected is it means that people have less emotional control. Say you're on a meeting, a colleague says something you don't like, and then you suddenly shut down and you say something rude. Right? So the teams that had the best communication, everyone had higher emotional control, meaning they might have felt angry, but they did not act angry. And then the last piece is exploration, right? And this is communication that teammates engage in outside of their core team, right? And for you guys here, it might be like, you really only have a core team. But as you start to expand, what it is that you have people that might be like, you might have sales, coaching, you might have like a little IT guy in the background, you might have like one finance person, just collections, and it might be like you and a COO, like whatever it is, right? Is the sales team talking to the coaching team? How often does the sales team talk to someone in finance? How often does someone that's like doing the IT shit in the back talk to the founder? And when I heard that, I was like, oh shit. I looked at my team and they're all like, my team over here. And I'm like, have you talked to Font? They're like, no, this is my team. I'm like, below me, my team. No, it's not your fucking team. We're all one team. And so what I started doing was I actually started assigning people projects that forced them to talk to people in other departments or functions so that I could create more of the explorative aspect of this. So if right now you feel like people are siloed, that's why. You have to force them to communicate with people outside of their world. So, all together, this is what creates good communication in a company. You have energy times engagement, you add in emotional control times exploration. And that is what creates good communication in a company. Does that all sound like you guys can do one thing I just listed right there? Yes. Yeah. Amazing. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, communication. 1, you don't communicate, in the dark, you say nothing, ugh. 10 is like it's absolutely subpar. Everybody's on the same page. It's like fuck sunshine and rainbows all the time. Great. The fourth principle out of 5 is cadence. It's my favorite one to get into. Okay, what is a company cadence? Sounds very interesting. I know you guys are like, I came here to make some money. This bitch is talking about meetings. Yeah, okay. What is a company meeting cadence? Okay, it's how often regularly scheduled meetings happen in your business. You just feel something in it, right? I get it. But what is that supposed to do for a company, right? If you feel like that's your company, on the left for you, yeah. You want to get it to feel like the right? And that's what a company meeting cadence can do. You want to think of it like it's a heartbeat for your team. That's how I think of it, at least. So basically, without it, it's hard to tell how healthy the team is, because there's no predictable cadence that you know it should run on. And I know what you're thinking, you're like, Leila, why are we talking about fucking meetings today at Coaching Con? I'm like, listen, let me talk to you for a second about this. I swear, if you can listen for 5 minutes, this works. Okay, why are meetings advantageous for a company if done well? Because a predictable and reliable meeting cadence can eliminate uncertainty, promote security and creativity in a company. I'll never forget when I first scheduled meetings. It was a weekly team meeting. At Gym Launch, when we first started, believe it or not, we were making a ton of money and didn't have any meetings. But it was awful, it felt overwhelming, it felt like nobody was communicating, we were just talking all the time on Voxer. The Voxer was the thing back then. And everyone was saying that they felt like it was very disorganized. And I remember we had our first meeting, and everyone said how relieved they felt. And that was when I was like, shit, there might be something to it. Like, I don't want to be on these meetings, but you guys got me. Because I was getting updates on the company, I was queuing them in, I was being informative, right? And so, I'm sure the question is like, well, could you function without me? Yes, you could function without me. But most people are not good enough communicators that they can do without one of these. And so, if you feel like you're constantly in reactive mode and never able to get ahead, you're frustrated that you and your team are not on the same page, you're in the dark about the real problems in your own company, you're confused as to what all these fucking people that you're paying are doing, and things are never moving fast enough, then maybe you should consider it. And so the question is, how can you know if your meetings are good if you're not good at running them? Because what most people say is, they're like, listen, I've tried meetings, Leila. Like, not for me. I'm like, have you ever studied how to run a meeting? Have you read a book on how to have a meeting? Have you ever practiced running a meeting? Have you ever learned? It's like, no. Well, that used to be my time. Literally, I remember the day that I was like, it was probably, I want to say it was late 2018. I was sitting in these meetings, I was like, dude, fuck these things. I'm so sick of this. I remember I went to Alex, and I was like, I'm so fucking bored. I'm sitting in fucking meetings all day, it's so useless. I'm gonna get rid of all of these. I'm gonna go really like hip cool, like we do no meetings. And then it occurred to me. I was like, interesting. So if I own a company and I'm running these meetings all day and I think they suck, then I actually suck at running meetings. It's me, which is great because I can fix that, right? And what I realized is that I spend 90% of my time hosting a meeting, attending a meeting, running a meeting, shadowing a meeting, watching a call of a meeting, and I never even read one single book on a meeting. I was like, literally, it was like a light bulb. I was like, I'm so dumb. I'm like saying, hey, you're gonna go all these meetings, I probably have no fucking clue what I'm doing, right? And that's what I did. I decided to read a shit ton of books on meetings. There's 4 of them. I think I read like 8. Literally, because I was like, I need to figure this out. And so, what I want to break down is what I've taken from all these books and all the things I've researched and all the practice that I've had, and my personal experience of my team telling me that they actually really feel like our cadence is effective and productive and they enjoy it, is the 3 successful elements of meeting cadence. Okay, I've come up with the 3 P's, which is purpose, pulse, and preparation. Okay, I try to make this as simple as possible. This is how I think through my framework for what a company meeting cadence needs to look like. Pulse, what is that, right? The pulse of your cadence is going to determine if meetings are productive or pointless. Most people in here probably feel like half of your meetings are incredibly pointless, yeah? No? Nobody? Okay, well then we should just stop now. Right, so the pulse that you want is going to be determined by the activity happening in the company and the size of the company. So this is what I took a long time trying to figure out. I was like, okay, how do you determine the pulse of meeting cadence? I was like, okay, the more activity you have in the company, typically the more communication you need, which typically means you might put in more micro meetings. For example, if you're rolling out a new initiative, then that means that you're probably going to have like little huddles that you're doing to try and roll it out, to have communication, make sure the project's moving forward, put a scrum in place, whatever, right? Same goes for size. Smaller company, most people here, if you're below 10 million, you shouldn't be inundated in meetings. That would be ridiculous. That wouldn't make any sense. But if you're doing 100 million, there's probably a lot of meetings happening in the company. Make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So what does that look like? Well, if we're not doing enough meetings, it feels like chaos, it feels like disorganization, it feels like there's no follow-through, there's a weak culture, low innovation, and silos. Whereas on the other end, if we have too many meetings, it feels like nobody's productive, we're working long hours, it's very duplicative, there's low speed and low morale. Has anyone ever felt that way before? Just like, oh my god, we're spending all our time talking to each other, fuck, we're staring at your face all day, right? But what we want is we want to hit the sweet spot in the middle, which is when we have high productivity, we increase morale, fast innovation, collaborative, and high accountability. That is what it feels like when you hit this right. And what you have to understand is this is in constant flux. There is always a right cadence for the right time, but there's no standard prescription. Everyone comes up to like, would you recommend EOS or would you recommend the meeting reader? And I'm like, literally, fucking kill me. Like, none of these are right. It's like being like, should I eat 1,000 calories or should I eat 1,800 calories? And you guys are like, oh my God, blow my brains out. Like, it's neither. It's like, what works for you? Same for your company. When people are like, which meeting thing should I follow and planning system? I'm like, you take the best of all and you make it for you. And that's what I'm trying to teach you here. That's why it's not like this is the meetings you need, because it's different for every company. No, there's no one size fits all. And if anyone has told you that, I would bet fucking $1,000 they're trying to sell you their fucking cadence. I'm not trying to sell you anything. So what it looks like is you can get too distant, you can get too close, and what we want is to be in sync, right? What you have to remember is that every time you forget to regulate the cadence, what it feels like is that you're out of control. You either feel like you're unproductive or you feel like there's chaos. And so you, as the owner of the company, have to go through and you have to be able to audit and make sure that these things are in line. It's your job, nobody else's. I can promise you that most people on your team aren't going to be like, hey, this meeting is really useless. Most people don't do that. That's pulse. Now, what's purpose? Okay, purpose. The purpose of a meeting cadence is the reason for why each individual meeting exists. This is what most people get wrong. So, the purpose could be strategic, it also could be tactical. Okay, what does that look like? Tactical means it's the doings, it's when it's small, it's the how and the short term. Whereas the strategic is the planning, it's the large scale initiatives, it's the why, it's the long term. Typically, we have, how often are we talking about the strategic or tactical? Are we talking about it annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly, or daily? Tends to be that the less frequently we talk about it, the more strategic it is, the more frequently we talk about it, the more tactical it is. And at that point, you have to argue, should this be a meeting or should it be a Slack? The next question is, how much time do we need to achieve the purpose of the meeting? The best thing that you can do is like, it's not an hour or 30 minutes. It's like, could it be 15 minutes? Could it be 5 minutes? Could it be 10 minutes? Could it be 25 minutes? Could it be 40 minutes? Most people just think in like 30 or an hour. But we want to be able to think in increments so that you're never taking more time than you need for something. Because that's one of your most valuable assets. And lastly, we have preparation, right? Which is, again, the piece that typically gets wrong. Preparation is the process of making the meeting useful, okay? Preparation is literally information plus people divided by the agenda. Okay, so let me break this down so you guys understand what I'm saying here. Information. What information should the attendees have ahead of time in order to achieve the purpose of the meeting? If we're having a meeting to discuss something, to make a decision, but we have not given them the same information that we hold in our heads, then that means that there should be no meeting, because they don't have all the information they need to make that decision. People. Who should attend the meeting in order to achieve the purpose of the meeting? We have contributors and we have decision makers. Okay, so what does that mean? A contributor is somebody who has information and a perspective to share that will attribute to making the decision in the meeting. That doesn't mean that they're a decision maker, but it might be that they're closer to the problem or the situation and they can provide valuable insight to the decision makers. And on the other side, you have the decision makers, people that are going to make the decision on that call. And then the agenda, which seems easy. What needs to be discussed or shared in what order to achieve the purpose of the meeting? That is it. Those are the three things we put together, and if we do those things successfully, we have a successful meeting cadence. So again, go ahead and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no organization in place at all. 10 is it's amazing, there's no problems, you don't relate to anything I said, and you probably went to the bathroom. Awesome. The last piece of this is recognition. What is recognition? Recognition is the acknowledgement of a person or team's behavior, effort, or business result that supports the organization's goals and values. So Mary Kay Ash said this, there are two things that people want more than sex and money, and that is recognition and praise. And guys, I swear to you, this is the fucking unlock. So, what wife is more likely to make dinner? The wife whose husband eats the dinner, she literally puts it in front of him. She's made this beautiful dinner. She spent all this time. She spent 3 hours preparing. She looked it up on Pinterest. She looked through all the recipes. It's been like a thing for days. And then she makes the beef Wellington because it's her husband's favorite dish. And then she makes it, she puts it in front of him, and he starts eating it. And she's like, he's like, what? She's like, what are you thinking? And he's like, it's good. She's like, fuck. Right? She's like, can't even. Is she gonna make dinner again? Is she gonna make him beef Wellington again? Do you guys think so? No. She's like, fuck you. You didn't even like it. He's like, no, I do. It's not that I don't like it. She's like, if you did the sauce like last time, so I didn't say anything. And like, yeah, you get it, right? Same goes for the husband who takes out the trash. Whose husband is more likely to take out trash? The wife who says, you know, trash is sitting there again. I guess I'll just take it out like normal. He's like, okay, do you want me to take it out? She's like, yeah, that would be nice if you did that every once in a while. He's like, okay. Never steps foot in the fucking kitchen again, right? Or near her, divorce. Or the wife who every time her husband takes out the trash, she's like, honey, oh my God, you're so amazing. Thank you for taking out the trash. It's really hard because I'm already in my pajamas and blah, blah, blah. So I did my face, I want to touch the trash. He's like, oh, you're welcome, sweetie. Right? Like, probably the husband whose wife is actually nice to him. That would make sense. Recognition reinforces behavior. Recognition reinforces behavior. Do you want to get, for example, if you are in fitness, do you want to get your clients to eat more healthy food? Congratulate them and praise them every time they eat a fucking piece of celery. Seriously, if you could sit next to the people that you're trying to get to lose weight, and every time they took a piece of bite of celery, you're like, amazing, so good. The dumber it sounds, the better it works. That would work. And this is what I want you guys to get with team. People are like so focused on punishment and criticism, but the unlock is praise and recognition. Recognition could be your biggest competitive advantage, right? So what can it actually do in an organization if you really embody the recognition and praise? Reduce employee turnover by 18%, increase culture sentiment by 66%, increase profitability by 23%, increase engagement at 14%, and increase your ability to recruit by 56%. I can tell you, because we recruit for all of our portfolio companies, and the ones that have punishing behaviors, you can't really recruit for. So, why does this matter to you? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You have learned how to make money and make a business, but what will soon stop you is your inability to lead people to make money to make a business. That is why this stuff is so fucking important. Because eventually it will stop at you. If you're only investing in your skill set, like the smartest people in this room have brought their teams. They paid for their teams to come here. Their teams are watching on the show right now. They're all on the same page. If you're in this room alone, think about that. And what you'll get if you don't have this in place, if you don't have recognition, if you don't praise your people, more demands for higher pay. People who feel undervalued are the most likely people to ask for higher pay. More time off requests. People that are unengaged because they feel undervalued at work ask for time off more frequently. More employee turnover. Obvious results of both of those. Lower customer retention. Because the less they feel that you care about them, the less they care about your customers. Lower customer conversion. Because again, they're not convicted on the product because you're not convicted on them. And lower profitability. Because all of these things lead to less money. And that is why we put together an actual recognition program. This is something I did very early on in the business. So if someone feels like, well, Leila, yeah, this is part of your business, like, of course you have a recognition program. I'm like, motherfucker, I did this with like 10 people because it is important. What is that? It's a business initiative to formally acknowledge a person or behavior that we want to reinforce in the company. So if you want someone to do more of something, you should recognize it. What does that break down to? There's the what, the who, the how, and the when. And if we put them all together, then we have recognition. So I want to break it down for you guys. And guys, again, like I said, if you walk away trying to improve any one of these things in your business, let it be this one. The when. Outcome. An easy one for people to tie recognition to, right? This could be tied to completing a goal. So an example of that would just be like they completed a project that you assigned to them that quarter. The second would be effort. I prefer this one. which is recognition of employees whose behavior is more likely to lead to a result, right? Because you know that it will eventually get there. And the thing is that if you reward the wrong outcomes, right, or if you reward an outcome and not the behavior that leads to the outcome, then they might find sneaky ways to get the outcome, which is why I prefer effort plus outcome, right? So it's like, imagine you say, I'm gonna give you this commission for making a sale, and there's like the top sales rep, he's making all these sales, but it's like their discounts, their like payment plans over like 18 or 24 months, it's like $100 every 3 weeks, and you're like, fuck man, I can't even pay you commission on this, right? It's like, because you're only rewarding him for closing the sale, you're not rewarding him for how he closes the sale. Third would be milestone. So it's like somebody has reached a certain point in the company or a significant stage of development. This is a great one for clients as well. So it's like if somebody hits like I've lost 10 pounds, I've lost 20 pounds, like those are all mile markers that you can congratulate people for. The same goes for employees when they're attaining skills in your company. And last one is value. So it's just recognition for adhering to the values of your organization. Easy one. Now let's talk about the who, because I think most of the time when I'm talking to you guys, you're thinking to yourself, like, this is a lot of work for me. But it's not just for you to do. This is a culture that you build. It does start with you putting the effort towards it, but it is upon everyone to hold these standards. So what does that look like, right? We've got manager or leader to the people below them. That is one way that you can recognize people, right? But there's also company to those people, right? Which is like you're doing it in a larger setting, so it's like you recognizing in front of people, more powerful. But what is even more powerful is peer-to-peer. Really interesting is that people that feel that their peers encourage them at work are actually the most engaged, and they are the most likely to adhere to their job. When I got that, I was like, got it. That's why team is so important. Then there's the what of recognition, okay? Formal versus spontaneous. There's two kinds of recognition that you can give. The first one I'm going to talk about, you may have heard of. The second one, I really want you guys to cue in on. Formal recognition is just like a predetermined and predictable way to formally acknowledge people in the workplace and their accomplishments to the company, right? So it's a formal thing you put in place. What does that look like, right? It might be like yearly, you have like MVP of the year. We had that at Gym Launch. It was like every year, there was like one person who was MVP, right? But again, we started when we were really small. It was like, oh shit, we had the same MVP. At least it's a year. We'll hope it grow by then, right? Annual bonus, it could be years of service awards. It could be quarterly. So it could be quarterly reviews. It could be, we called it the Jedi Award, which is just effing does it. It's like who gets the most shit done. And then it could be attainment of goals. Monthly could be employee of the month. It could be attainment of a monetary goal, some other kind of goal. And then weekly, you've got things like birthdays, anniversaries, little wins that they've had for clients, testimonials. Now, on the other side, what you probably haven't thought about is spontaneous recognition. Because a lot of you might just do this by accident. You might not think about it. But what it is, it's a flexible and timely method to formally acknowledge behaviors and accomplishments. Okay? What does that look like? It looks like the moment that Sarah saves a client from an escalation, you ping her immediately. It looks like you send a handwritten card to your operator because they hired a great sales rep, or they increased closing by X%. You immediately, you can literally, there's an app called Handwritten, it can send it in 24 hours. There's wow gifts. So it's like someone, say your top rep closed the most deals, you send him a virtual gift card, he gets it within like an hour. It's like, cool, now he's got like a whole spa day with his wife. Guys do spa days. T-shirt. You can send someone a t-shirt because say that they embodied your core value. At Gym Launch, one of the things that I used to do was that every time someone embodied a core value that we had, I would send them a t-shirt with that core value on it. So it's like really understanding that that is what we want to see more of. And last days you could highlight in a company email, highlight it in the weekly meeting you have, in the huddles that you have as well. What I want you to understand with the spontaneous is the reason that I like this more is because humans, the longer that you wait to recognize someone for behavior, the more they are not able to attribute why they're getting praise. So recency is the most important thing in this equation. The faster you can be, like me on Slack, I'm like fucking pinging people all day. I'm like, yeah, great fucking job, man, right? Because it's like the faster you can do that, The faster you can do that, the more people are going to understand what they're doing and how it impacts the organization. And they're like, ah, I just did this thing, I got the carrot. Like, it's the whole, like, we're not that complicated. The faster you can reward someone, the more likely they are to do it again. And then there's the how. How are you going to reward people? How are you going to recognize people, right? You've got written, you've got verbal, and you've got reward-based. Written would be like company newsletter, social media shout out, handwritten card. This tends to be good, but it's not usually the best form. The best form actually tends to be verbal. A shout out in a meeting, a one-on-one praise, acknowledgement to their boss, something where they can see your expression and yourself is the most impactful and is the most reinforcing. And lastly is reward-based. I would never do reward alone. I would always pair it with the verbal or written. But it could be like giving them a bonus, sending them the custom swag, giving them a trophy, they get an award of some sort, right? And so the ideal scene is that if you do none of this right now, you start small and add in variety. And so the way I think through this is I call it like my recognition scrambler. But I have this synced on my phone, and I look through it every time somebody does something good. And I think to myself, how do I want to recognize this person? I'm not kidding you, I have this on my phone, I just look at it. I'm like, is it going to be formal or spontaneous? Well, obviously I'm looking at my phone, it's going to be spontaneous, right? Okay, well, who's going to recognize? Sometimes I will prompt somebody else on the team to recognize someone because I know there would mean more coming from them. Because I try to praise people consistently so then they get desensitized to me. Is it going to be written, verbal, or reward-based? And it's going to be based on the outcome, the effort, the milestone, and the value. That is how you think through how to recognize people in an organization. So go ahead, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on recognition. 1 is you recognize no one, you're probably silent, and they actually probably think you're mad all the time. 10 is it's fantastic, and everyone thinks that you're great, they're happy to be there, they do more work because they like you, they like what they do. Wonderful. So, what did we cover today? We covered how to set clear expectations. Sounds so not sexy. How to hold people accountable. How to communicate effectively. How to not, totally, that was not written correctly. Something about a meeting cadence. And how to deploy recognition. So if you put all those together, that creates the 5-star management principles that we use at acquisition.com, that we use within our portfolio companies, and that we use to drive behavior. What I want you to remind you guys is that I understand all of the fundamentals and what you guys are learning here is incredibly important. But for those of you who want to fucking go big, this is the shit that's going to get you there. And the reason for that is you don't build a business, you're going to end up building people, and then they will build the business. Thank you all.